Good afternoon. Welcome to the National Press Club. This is the place where news happens. I'm Allison Fitzgerald Kojak. I am the 2019 president of the National Press Club and the investigations editor at the Associated Press. Excuse me. We have a terrific program here, and we invite you to listen, watch, or follow along on Twitter at PressClubDC using the hashtag NPCLive. For our C-SPAN and public radio audiences, please be aware that the audience today, there are members of the general public, so any applause or reactions to our speaker are not necessarily from the working press. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge our headliners team, co-chaired by Lori Russo, and Donna Leinwan-Leger of DC Media Strategies, and our press club staff liaison, Lindsay Underwood, and NPC Executive Director Bill McCarran for your roles in making this event happen. Thank you, everybody. I'm now going to take a moment and introduce our head table. If you could please hold any applause you may want to offer until we get through the whole head table. To my far left is Frank Mazzano, Senior Principal at Bracewell and a member of our NPC Headliners team. Mark Heller, Agriculture Reporter at E&E News. Next to Mark is Lisa Jenkins, the Americas reporter at Chemical Watch. And to my immediate left is Michael Dorning, Agriculture and Rural Politics reporter at Bloomberg News. Skipping over the podium and our speaker for a moment, we have Lori Russo, president of Stanton Communications and the co-chair of our headliners team, as I mentioned earlier. Philip Brasher, executive editor at AgriPulse. Ellen Ferguson, Agriculture and Trade reporter at CQ Roll Call and a member of our NPC Headliners team. And Ellen Birga, Ellen, you arrived, Senior Vice President of Communications at the National Milk Producers Federation and a former president of the National Press Club. And finally, Tyler Wyant, Deputy Operations Director at Politico Pro and a member of the NPC Headliners team. Agribusiness has experienced a seismic shift over the past few decades as low crop prices have spurred a wave of consolidation. There are now just a handful of global corporations serving farmers from planting through harvest. One of the biggest mergers was that of Dow and DuPont, which brought together a top chemicals conglomerate. You'd think I wasn't a radio reporter. And the world's second biggest seed producer. From that combination arose Corteva Agriscience, which sells agriculture products ranging from seeds to software. Leading a global company like Corteva means dealing with volatility in everything from developing world governments to weather, and the winds of U.S. politics. Presidential candidates, including Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, have called for the breakup of companies exactly like the ones James Collins leads. And the investment companies like Corteva make in technologies such as genetically modified seeds, make them a big target for environmental groups and anti-corporate activists who worry about how much control a small number of companies has over the global food supply. Jim Collins spent more than 30 years at DuPont, rising through the ranks from sales rep to become chief executive officer of Corteva Agriscience, which was a spinoff. Now he's leading the integration of Dow AgriSciences into the division, making Corteva a purely agriculture business, offering a full range of seed, agrochemical, digital services, and digital services. Collins has a bachelor's degree of science in chemical engineering from the Christian Brothers College and an MBA from the University of Delaware. Please give a warm National Press Club welcome to Jim Collins.
Great. Thank you, Allison, for that kind introduction today. And it's great to be up here at the table here with so many of these distinguished guests. And certainly good afternoon to everybody here in the room as well as online. I would say it's a real privilege for me to be here with members of the Washington Press Corp and so many good friends and partners and colleagues from our nation's capital. I'm especially excited to see so many guests here today on what is turning out to be a rather slow news day. So it's great that you were here. So as I started preparing my remarks this afternoon, it reinforced to me something that many of us, I'm sure, feel very strongly about. It's that our fourth estate, the profession of journalism, has never been more important or more vital to American society than it is today. I want to thank all of our members of the working press for what you do, day in and day out, for advancing our democracy, for spreading knowledge, and holding all of our institutions accountable. Without question, we in the business world, and of course the world of agriculture, we need a strong press. And indeed, a healthy economy and society are just as vital to our media today. So now I would be disingenuous to my journalistic friends if I said we've always seen eye to eye on all the issues. We haven't, but that's okay, because from that dialogue, from that engagement comes a much greater understanding and much greater respect. So over the years, scores of leaders from American agriculture have appeared on this podium to share insights and progress on the state of our nation's farms, farmers, and rural areas. So it's encouraging to see that agriculture commands so much growing interest from the media and from the American public. And for good reason. Agriculture is at an incredible juncture. It may be the most challenging of times for us, but I believe with that comes opportunity, a chance to do some things differently. On one hand, our industry continues to make extraordinary gains to help feed the world and benefit mankind in so many ways. The rate of technological, environmental, and educational breakthroughs has never been greater. In fact, just at our current rate of progress, we are on track to see a sharp decline in food insecurity over the next 10 years. The U.S. Department of Agriculture now estimates that the world's food insecure population will fall from 19% to 9% by the year 2029. Now that's 330 million more people, or the equivalent of the population of the United States, who won't have to worry about where their next meal comes from. Now, even so, many fast-growing pockets of the world, including sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia, will continue to face daunting challenges. We're going to have to increase agriculture production by 70% from today's standards to feed a world projected to be at 9 billion people by 2050. That's over 2 billion more people added to the planet over the next 30 years. Now, agriculture, of course, will also continue to play a significant role in meeting the world's demand for food, but also for energy, which is expected to increase by more than 40% by 2035. So the future of biomass and other agriculturally produced fuels is part of our nation's energy mix moving forward. They play a key role in ensuring and securing our future energy independence. So food and energy do make the world go round, and agriculture sits at the nexus of this dynamic world. So the key challenges for us in the industry and those who influence our industry is how can we do this in the right way? How do we ensure progress for those who produce and who consume without endangering our natural resources, without adding to the world's carbon burden, or jeopardizing the economics of farmers and farming communities? How do we thread that needle in a time of growing trade disputes and regulatory burdens? How do we keep our younger generations on the farm? And what's our role at alleviating consumer anxiety over the issues like genetically modified foods and other emerging food technologies? Indeed, we have a lot of questions to answer and so many issues that we need to work together to resolve. But let me also be very clear. I am an optimist. I spent virtually my entire career working in agriculture and know that there are few industries or ways of life that possess more grit and more resilience than farming. Even with tough weather conditions and threats from new pests and changing global markets and, yeah, even higher tariffs, farmers go out each morning, face the elements, they plant and they harvest crops, they raise livestock, to feed Americans and billions of people around the world. So with my time today, I'd like to address 4 issues that I believe should command the attention of everyone who touches agriculture here in Washington and, of course, around the country. 4 issues that we in the ag industry and public policy arena must collectively address to ensure the sustainable health of farmers, our food system, and our continued ability to feed a growing nation and a growing planet. So those 4 issues are, first, ag trade policy; second, farmer and consumer advocacy; third, ag technological innovation; and number 4, ag's role in driving a more climate-positive future. Now, these issues are also commanding more and more attention from the mainstream press. So, let's start with the big one. Let's start with trade. As you can imagine, I'm often asked by journalists and others if I agree or disagree with some of the current trade policies that we see in the United States and around the world. My answer is always the same. I'm in favor of trade policies and regulations that benefit our growers and those who consume their bounty. If these 2 important constituents aren't benefiting, then we must strive for better policy. It's to our nation's advantage that every journalist and influencer here today remain vigilant in your examination of fair and just trade and these specific economic issues. The world cannot afford to have agriculture politicized through unjust trade restrictions and other costly measures. At the same time, we need to continue to promote sound, science-based thinking and science-based dialogue. Cool heads need to prevail, not only in Washington, but in other capitals all around the world. Now, a few weeks ago, I testified at the U.S. Senate Finance Committee about the benefits of moving forward with the United States, Mexico, and Canada Free Trade Agreement, the USMCA. The social and economic arguments of the proposed pact are pretty hard to dispute. Today, almost a third of American jobs created by international trade come from trade with Mexico and Canada. That's 12 million jobs. And over 1 million of those are tied to the food and ag sectors. In our conversations with farmers, they stress that trade is a crucial element needed for their long-term success. And today, they see large markets like China that are constricting, which is causing grains to hit new price lows, and other crops are still languishing in silos due to ongoing global trade tensions. Farmers tell us that they appreciate aid, financial aid, but what they really want are new markets and a free flow of trade. You may have heard the statement, trade, not aid. This is why the passage of the USMCA this fall is so important to that. The U.S. International Trade Commission estimates that the market access provisions of USMCA would increase total U.S. agriculture and food exports by $435 million a year. And when all of the provisions of USMCA are considered, the impact could be more than $2 billion. Equally important are the long-term benefits to farmers and consumers, not only here in North America, but ultimately all around the world. There are so many elements of a sensible USMCA plan that could be applied to other international trade regimes to support employment and economic growth in our farming communities. Additionally, any measures that preserve market access, protect our biotechnology innovations, and secure intellectual property, as well as enhancing the sanitary and phytosanitary standards, are measures that we just all need to get behind. We also know that markets hate uncertainty. And right now, the world is rife with uncertainty, and it's my belief and Corteva Agriscience's belief that passage of USMCA would be an important stabilizing factor right now when we need it the most. I know many here today would feel the same way. So closely related to trade is the second area that we need to dial up as industry and public policy community, and that is our ongoing advocacy efforts for farmers and consumers. Now, back in June, as Allison said, we stood up a new company, a pure-play ag company, Corteva Agriscience, one that goes to market with nearly $14 billion in sales, 20,000 employees in over 140 countries around the world. We're supported by over 140 R&D facilities, 13,000 patents, and over 65 active ingredients that we combine together to make thousands of products. It's the culmination of nearly 3 years of intense planning, integration, and daily execution in all of those markets around the world. We brought together the combined resources of Dow, DuPont, including our Pioneer seed brand, to serve farmers and ranchers with innovative products and services that they really need. Now, these companies already had some strong portfolios of seed and crop protection, but we made them stronger. We strengthened our presence in emerging markets around the world and added a strong digital presence to a digital space to our offering. We have a very experienced team, one that knows and loves this industry and is very excited about this mission here at Corteva. And it's very simple. It's to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume, ensuring progress for generations to come. Now, putting farmers and consumers at the center of our business and our operating model is a very intentional act that we believe will be transformational for us and very sustainable. Over the past few years, we've put into place a host of very formal as well as some informal listening engagement routines with consumers and farmers all around the world. And we're starting to develop some consistent themes from those conversations. Today, consumers want to know more about the food that they are eating, where it's sourced, who grew it, under what conditions, and using what kinds of inputs. Many are seeking alternatives to the traditional animal production as a source of their protein, and many are exploring food as a source of well-being. More and more, consumers are also focused on food waste. Some are concerned about genetically modified foods, and virtually all of them want a food system that is environmentally sound and sustainable. Perhaps, not surprisingly, consumers don't trust big ag companies, but they trust farmers the most. Our farmers around the world also paint a very consistent picture. All are concerned about economics and their own profitability. Most are troubled by the growing trade tensions around the world, and while they understand the value and the merits of green and sustainable agriculture, they're very worried that they will have to bear the brunt of the costs associated with these new processes, routines, and regulations. Today's farmers want better and simpler solutions to help them maximize their productivity, focused on yields. They worry about their children's future, and indeed, the future of the family farm that they were entrusted with. They are open to new technologies, and they do see the benefits of digital and predictive agriculture. They understand consumers' expectations about food and agriculture are changing, but they worry that they might lack the resources to stay ahead of these changes. So we're using these and other consumer and farmer insights to guide our thinking, to help drive our business going forward. From our community engagement strategies, to our innovation pipeline, to the priorities that we share as a business team, to our focus on developing a solutions-based portfolio for our customers, our growers. Now, one really great example of this is our recent introduction of a product we call Inatreq. It's a naturally derived cereal fungicide that protects farmers' crops while satisfying consumers' demand for more natural inputs. We're delighted that it's been quickly approved for use, and we see it as one of the many solutions that will be held in a very favorable light by farmers consumers, and regulators all at the same time. It's a great example of how we as a company can stand with farmers and consumers. And we would love to work with our industry partners and public policy leaders here today to not only organize future consumer-farmer outreach programs, but to develop strategies to incorporate even better advocacy. Efforts that bring consumers and farmers closer to each other and our respective organizations is a good thing. All ideas are on the table, and all are welcomed to join us in this effort. So this leads me to the third area that I believe demands our attention today. That's in promoting ag technologies that are safe and grounded in sound science. At Corteva, we have over 5,000 researchers, scientists, and technologists working around the world to develop safe, productive, and profitable seed, crop protection, and digital technical solutions for farmers. And we'd love to show you firsthand some of the many advances that we're making. New gene editing technologies like CRISPR-Cas, which comes with the promise of producing better tasting and more nutritious fruits and vegetables that ripen faster and don't spoil as quickly. We also have a variety of new seed and crop protection enhancements and new predictive agricultural systems, all of which have the power to transform our industry and the lives of farmers and consumers worldwide. That said, we are well aware that some consumers here and elsewhere are cynical about the intentions of a large-scale ag company like ours. And we know it's up to us to better frame the work that we do and our industry partners are advancing to create a more sustainable food system. So about 3 weeks ago, we released a survey of European farmer and consumer attitudes about sustainable food systems. It was conducted by Longitude. It's a division of the Financial Times group. A little call out to the Financial Times in case there's someone here in the audience today. The results of that survey were actually quite encouraging. For instance, more than half of consumers surveyed said that they were ready to accept new plant breeding technologies and were willing to pay more for food that was grown in this manner. At the same time, farmers interviewed said they plan to implement some of these new breeding techniques in the future. So that was pretty extraordinary alignment. More consumers not only accepting it and willing to pay for it, but more farmers embracing it. Some other important findings from the survey. When shopping for sustainably produced food, consumers told us they care a lot about reducing waste, supporting small farms, and limiting the use of synthetic crop protection chemistry. The study also showed that more than a quarter of farmers see consumers' demands as their greatest challenge in the immediate future, believing it to be just as important as managing the pest pressure that they have on their farm every day. So at Corteva, we are ready to work with everyone in that value chain to support farmers in delivering sustainable food that meet that consumer demand. This brings me to the fourth area, which I believe we can use the power of our voices to have a very positive outcome, and that's in the area of climate change. In addition to food security, no industry has been impacted more by climate change than the agriculture industry. In fact, you can understand that those two issues are tightly interwoven. While our industry has been cited as part of the problem with climate change has also had a significant impact on farmers' ability to farm and produce. As farmers and others in the ag industry work tirelessly to double food production needed to feed the projected 9 billion people out there by 2050, so too must we work smarter, more efficiently, and with a smaller carbon footprint. The good news is we have the talent and we have the innovation acumen to rise to that challenge. In fact, an integral part of the mission of Corteva is to use our convening power within our industry and across the entire food value chain to help bring about more sustainable and more collaborative solutions. So we've begun an initiative to bring forth a working group of business and government, academic, and NGO partners with the aim of making the ag industry more climate positive. For too long, the conversation around climate change has taken place in echo chambers. Businesses talking to other business leaders, regulators talking to regulators, scientists just talking to scientists, and NGOs with other NGOs. It turns out all of us are part of the solution here. We all should have a voice. We need to learn and how to listen and engage. When we bring the collective strengths together in that spirit of collaboration and accountability, we know we now have the power to create a food system that produces sufficient healthy food while actually removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. So far, we've held convenings in Europe and the US and Singapore, and more are in the planning stages, including a gathering next month at the World Food Prize in Des Moines, Iowa. Now, I mentioned earlier that I'm an optimist by nature, perhaps no more so than in this area of moving towards more climate-positive agriculture. We have powerful tools at our disposal today that didn't exist just a few short years ago. Already in our pipeline, we are working on gene-edited products and predictive ag solutions that address carbon sequestration and input and resource management that play into a more climate-positive equation. With Granular, our new predictive ag solution, we can actually help farmers assess the carbon impact and other sustainability measures across their entire farm in a specific crop to help them optimize that on every single acre. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg from what's to come. And imagine multiplying one company's efforts with other companies and other organizations across the food and ag value chain. At Corteva, we're convinced that this is part of the future. Our R&D capabilities across our company and our industry have never been more robust, and we're seeing more and more proof that climate positive can be achieved while keeping our growers profitable. In fact, you don't actually have to travel very far from our nation's capital to see fantastic evidence of this. Out on soy, corn, and wheat farms on Maryland's Eastern Shore, there's tremendous innovative use of low-till, cover crop, and soil protection practices that are having a very positive impact on farmers' businesses, but also the very fragile Chesapeake Bay ecosystem. Not only do practices that they employ come with the promise of improving carbon and input footprints, but they can also actually produce a more climate-positive environment. I encourage you, go to the internet and watch a short feature that was put out by CBS News. It's called Farmers Using Smart Farming Technology to Fight Against Climate Change. It's a fantastic summary of the progress that we have already made. And it's effort like these and many others throughout the region that are protecting the Chesapeake Bay, a way of life, and its important agricultural bounty. So, as was reported just recently by the Washington Post and many other media outlets, the Chesapeake Bay, by most measures, is healthier today than it's been in any time over the last 30 years. And also, agricultural output are at all-time highs around the bay, proving that farmers can improve the environment and feed the world. So this afternoon, I've outlined 4 areas that I believe demand our attention in the ag industry and the public policy community. 4 areas that I would hope members of the media would continue to explore and disseminate to the broader public as well. And those 4 were ag trade issues, farmer and consumer advocacy, ag technological innovation, and climate change efforts that could be led by agriculture. Obviously, there are many more issues that demand our attention. But I also believe there isn't an agriculture or food system issue out there that doesn't intersect with the 4 that we just walked through. Now, all of us at Corteva look forward to continuing this dialogue and certainly continuing the engagement with the press and many of you. So I appreciate your time and your attention today. And as Allison said, I look forward to taking a few of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Luckily for you, we have questions that touch on all 4 of your areas.
Fabulous.
Here. I am going, and please continue to send up questions if you come up with any, but we do have a large pile here. I'm just going to start with trade because there seems to be a large bunch of questions on trade. And they are related. And the most basic question is how has the trade war or trade dispute, as we decided to call it, affect Corteva, and will it continue to affect your company's earnings going forward?
So great question. As I said earlier, clearly the trade disruptions or dislocations around the world have affected grain prices primarily, and those grain prices then affect the profitability of our customer base here in North America. Now, USDA has done a spectacular job of putting together aid packages that have helped support farmers in their role here and their patience as the administration has worked through the trade negotiations that we read about. That said, as I said earlier, farmers, rather than aid, they would love to have the grain trade. Specifically, the trade issues with China are primarily soybean related. And there's really only one, I'll call it, pile of soybeans that are produced here in the world. And there's only 3 countries that really do that. It's the US, it's Brazil, and it's Argentina. So the demand in the world is about the same. So that pile then just moves around to fill that demand as needed. So while demand for grain from the US is lower, demand for grain from places like Brazil and Argentina are at an all-time high, going to places like China. But the US grain supply will fill in those other gaps because that grain from Brazil that used to go to Vietnam or Indonesia or Thailand is now going to China. So grain from Iowa and the Midwest will fill in those gaps. So it's created some dislocations and some disruptions. But for our business, we're a global company. We play, as I said, in over 140 countries around the world, and we're working with growers to help them, provide solutions to help them meet this demand wherever it comes from. So,
Well, it sounds like you're saying that the demand is the same, it's just being shifted around, but we hear a lot of stories in the news about farmers in the U.S. who are really hurting from this. I understand Corteva may be able to shift quickly globally. How is it affecting the farmers you deal with?
again, it's a short-term effect, right? As we create and open new trade with new countries. So, every day USDA is announcing new trade connections with countries that we haven't had these types of relationships with before. And so, again, we've had a short-term set of dislocations, but the demand globally is about the same, and there's only one pile of soybeans, and it needs to kind of shift around and move around. Some of those markets for U.S. grain today are at lower profit points, which goes back to the point where it's really about grain pricing, and that's affecting farmer profitability. And as of right now, they're doing okay because of the aid that's been provided to them. But we're hoping that the administration clearly, in concert with Chinese officials, work quickly to get to some resolution so we can kind of get back to that open, free flow of trade around the world.
Okay, and one more here on trade. I think these 2 are actually related, so I'll combine them. Have you seen prices for chemicals or other components rise because of higher U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods? And separately, has your company sought exclusions or exemptions from steel and aluminum tariffs at the Commerce Department?
So on the steel and aluminum tariffs, really no connection to us in the ag space. As far as raw material prices, we have seen some increases. We've seen some margin compression. We've reported out about that quite a bit at our last earnings update. And so I think we've pretty much lapped most of those. So going forward, it's kind of the new reality of the cost of the inputs that we bring in. And going forward, we'll see how that continues. But I think the initial impact of that is pretty much over with, and we're back to kind of a steady state process going forward.
And then somebody asked about the aid packages going to farmers. Are they having a long-term impact on the agriculture industry?
I think that's a good question. They're designed to be a short-term aid in order to help growers through this tough period of time. Growers are adjusting their spending patterns like any good business person would to optimize their inputs. Maybe they're not investing so much in additional land this year. Maybe they're not replacing that tractor or that combine as quickly as they would in the past. But we would expect that as the trade flows return to normal and the supply and demand of grain kind of re-equilibrates, growers will go back to kind of where they were. Whether we've seen a big shift in acres around the world is still to be determined. The U.S. producer of grain, both corn and soybeans, is still the highest quality producer in the world and is certainly still the most efficient producer of grain crops in the world. So that's what farmers love to do. They love to compete on a global market because they can compete pretty much about as well as anyone around the world.
Well, this person asks, since these trade war has been largely the product of President Trump, can you explain why, according to many opinion polls, farmers remain supporters of the president?
Good question. I think what it boils down to is clearly there are issues that needed to be corrected, and the administration, I think people would agree that issues around intellectual property were something that needed to be addressed, and the administration gets good marks for stepping up to that. And I think growers understand that technology and innovation is the absolute source of their livelihoods going forward. They need companies like ours and others in the industry to be able to develop technologies and make those technologies broadly available. So I think in general that support stems from the fact that technology needs to be freely available, and growers are right now supporting the administration in that area.
Okay. And another political question. Elizabeth Warren says she wants to break up what she calls, quote, big ag, and says mergers, including the one that created your company, are leaving family farmers with fewer choices, thinner margins, and less independence. Is she right about that?
So consolidation in the ag industry, like consolidations that we've seen in so many other industries, it's really not just the ag industry that's gone through a round of consolidation. That consolidation is actually driven by our farmer customers. It's driven by their demand actually for more choices and driven by their demands for better economics, lower prices. So when a company like ours comes together, we're actually able to merge two R&D organizations to create more choices, not fewer, and we have plenty of evidence of that. We've launched more new products in the last 2 years since our merger announcement than I can remember launching as a single company over the years. So it's about providing more choices, and it's about being more efficient, especially in the R&D world, where we spend close to $1.2 billion on R&D every year. It's up to us to make sure that R&D dollar is spent as efficiently as possible so we can pass those savings along to our customers. So they benefit from lower input costs, lower prices, and they benefit from more choices. So our industry consolidation has been good for our customers.
Okay, I'm just going to say that's a pretty counterintuitive answer from what most people say about consolidation. When you say you've launched more products over the last 2 years, can you offer some of the evidence you were just saying?
Absolutely. It's on our website in our investor presentations that we put out here recently, and I've made that statement many times. And it was a commitment that we made to those who reviewed the deal that this was about more choices, not fewer, and I stand behind it as the business leader. And our folks again love agriculture. We put that farmer's need at the absolute center of everything we do. And so our job is to do more for them, not less.
So that will continue going forward?
Absolutely.
Okay. You keep mentioning farmers are at the center of what you do and consumers. Maybe a month or so ago, a large group of CEOs, I think organized by the Business Roundtable, put out a letter suggesting that corporations should change their focus from maximizing solely shareholder value to maximizing stakeholder value. Did you participate in that, and do you agree with that?
No, I wasn't. I did not participate in that specific event. You know, I can tell you, putting farmers and consumers at the center of everything we do is good for business. Meeting their needs with more choices and more opportunities drives, you know, more sales, more revenue, and more opportunities to earn and reward shareholders who invest in our company as well. And making sure that we understand and are keeping those societal trends around food and consumers' demands is good for our long-term sustainability as the business. And I think investors want long-term sustainable companies to invest in for the benefit of their investors. So.
I'm going to move on to climate change. You talked quite a bit about it, so you've actually already answered a few of these questions. But this is interesting. What impact has this year's wild weather had on your product offerings or demand? I mean, do you see immediate impacts from weather?
So in North America in 2019, I think we've been keeping very detailed records on rainfall and temperature and frost levels for about 150 years. And 2019 was the absolute worst start in all of that time of recording that. It was the latest, wettest, coldest start to a year. That said, look at the resiliency of U.S. and Canadian farmers. You know, in a period of 3 weeks, we planted, you know, almost 90 million acres of corn and another 80 to 90 million acres of soybeans, and did it in record time. And that crop is in the ground and it's still developing. We'll still see how that turns out. But clearly, during that time frame, there was a tremendous shuffling of products, specifically seed products that are designed for certain temperatures and certain geographies. When that season shifted like that, we were moving products all around the country to satisfy that. So first impact was you had to be as flexible as I've ever seen a company be to manage through this market. At the same time, our policies around supporting growers around replantings and product swaps and inventory management were also critical, and I think we do that about the best of anybody in the industry. And then being cognizant of the fact that we were going to lose some business as a result of that. Early treatments that growers would use to prepare their fields, they abandoned because there was no time, and treatments that, you know, likely they would be using in the second half of the year due to this compressed season, will lose some business as a result of that. During our second quarter earnings, we were very transparent about that with our investors. They understood that this was one of the worst years in 154 years, and we talked about how our business and that market looks going forward. Give me a normal weather year, and all of that business should come back as we've talked about before. So a lot of adjustments, a lot of flexibility on behalf of our team, and I couldn't be prouder of the Corteva organization, because we put those farmers' needs right at the center of everything we did to help them manage through what was really a tough start to the year.
What do you think is going to be a normal weather year?
It's another great question. Whatever normal is, but you know, weather is cyclical. We've seen it in Latin America the last couple of years. Things were pretty tough for Brazilian, you know, Maine summer as well as Safrinha season growers. This year is shaping up to be almost perfect. If I step away from the United States this year and I look in 2019, I look at Europe. Europe is about the best setup for an ag season that I can ever remember. And so it's also the power of being a global company, where we have some issues in one part of the world. There are other areas of the world that are doing quite well, and we, you know, adjust to take maximum advantage of the opportunities wherever they show up, and to work with growers who are struggling in the areas that they are as well. So there's always a normal weather year somewhere in the world. It's the best way to describe it.
Do you have long-term projections of where there will be ideal conditions for the crops that you work with? And how secret do you keep those?
We don't try to predict the weather. It's impossible. But there are regions around the world where, you know, the climate conditions are set up perfectly with the right amount of sun, the right amount of rain, and the soil is a big part of that. And clearly North America, Canada, U.S. is one of those. Brazil, Mato Grosso, and parts of Argentina is another area. And then Russia and the Ukraine. Back in history, both of those countries were strong breadbaskets for the rest of Europe, and that land is still just as fertile as it ever was.
I guess what I was asking, are you projecting out with climate change
So
anything? No?
we really don't. We don't try to predict the weather, but we do know there are areas of the world that are always going to be strong production ag markets, and those are the three that I mentioned.
Somebody asked, how are you preparing farmers for the effects of climate change? I know you're working with them, but are you doing anything in terms of long-term prep?
Sure. First is education, right? I think the first part of this is making sure that folks are educated on the progress that has already been made. I mentioned it several times in my remarks that growers are already producing more on less land than they ever have, and with less inputs. And so that's sustainability already, and that's helping with their footprint, carbon, whatever. Second, it helps with education of growers who sometimes believe that some of these changes are going to be onerous and problematic, maybe more costly. And we have great examples. The one I mentioned here, there are farmers right here on the Eastern Shore who are spending less. They are more climate positive. They are making more profits off of their farm than from the way they were farming before they put these new systems in place. And so getting our grower customers out to see these technologies in action, showing them, running demonstration farms, demonstrating that technology to others, and then being there with some products that can help them make that transition. So we are, as I mentioned, starting that education process using our voice along with others in the ag industry to start to get the message out that there are solutions today that can begin to solve these issues that we're talking about. We just need them implemented on a broad scale.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about things that may be considered climate positive, but perhaps not good for Corteva. This person asked, there's a lot of farm acreage being used now for solar panels to help farmers generate more income. Do you see this trend continuing to grow?
I know that I'm not as specifically familiar with the solar panel issues. I know that every day we lose valuable farmland to cities that are expanding, land that's taken up for solar panels. That said, there's good, solid core set land out there, and there's some marginal lands that over time may find other better uses than production ag. All in all, we're going to learn to produce more food off of the same or a smaller footprint going forward. We know that's that challenge, and that's why I mentioned we have to figure out how to double the production that we have today globally to keep up with losses, but also feed growing demand going forward. So it is an issue, regardless of its source.
And then I have a couple of questions about meat. Should people move more away from a meat-based diet in light of climate change? Is that something that your company is working on in any way? And then another questioner asks about Beyond Meat and Impossible Burgers using plant-based protein to replace meat. Did you see this as an opportunity for your company at all?
So as I often say, we need all the solutions that are out there and available to us. And part of the answer is, the use of more vegetable proteins. At the same time, a lot of those discussions as to why we should move away from meat is really more of a how to achieve an outcome discussion. I would much rather talk about the outcome that we're trying to manage. And in that argument, in that discussion, the outcome is greenhouse gas emissions. So if we can all align on the fact that reducing greenhouse gases is the key to improving any issues associated with climate change, then let's get the innovation industry focused on how do we eliminate greenhouse gases, rather than tell large populations around the world about the kind of food that they should eat. And so that's about having more of an outcomes approach rather than dictating the how. We have technologies today that around the world, when added to feed products, can reduce animal methane emissions. It's very well known, just not widely adopted. We have technologies, like I've mentioned, in crops like rice, for example. The use of flooding of rice paddices is one of the largest contributors methane greenhouse gas production anywhere in the world. So if we could solve the problem there, we would reduce that, and one of the ways is to move to a dry-seeded rice system, and we have the technology to work on that as well. So again, I'd rather focus, what is the outcome we're trying to achieve, and then turn the innovation, the bright minds that the industry has loose on the how, and we will need multiple hows, but let's be careful specifying that there's one important how to get there. I think there are multiple ways.
Okay, I'm just going to ask for clarity. You said we have the technology to work on that. Mm-hmm. Do you have the technology to do that, and you just need to spread it?
We do. We have the technology. It's getting the word out, starting to make it more broad-based, and sit down with regulators and others to communicate that these technologies have important environmental benefits, and I think some of the technologies in the past have been misunderstood.
I'm going to ask you for help pronouncing a word that I'm sure you're more familiar with than I am. Because we have a whole pile of questions.
Chlorpyrifos, yeah.
Okay. We have a lot of questions about chlorpyrifos. This one I will read. The European Union is moving to ban your pesticide chlorpyrifos. The Obama administration was also moving to restrict its use on food crops because of studies linking it to developmental delays. Under President Trump, and the EPA changed course and decided against restrictions. What is your outlook on this product?
Well, chlorpyrifos is a product that's been around for a long time. It's one of the most studied products in the industry, and we maintain that there are safe uses and safe opportunities. It is a very important tool that growers utilize in their suite of tools to control a number of pests. And we are working and cooperating with the EPA on their and European Union on their further analysis of the chemistry. We are also aware that there are consumer and regulator, interests in, continuing to move forward with better, safer, healthier, more sustainable alternatives, and we think we're one of the companies that is bringing that next wave of new products as well. So there will always be products that are under scrutiny. At the same time, we'll always be part of a solution of bringing more of those newer products to replace others over time as we learn more.
Okay, I have a couple of follow-ups on that. One, does that mean you disagree with whatever the science and evidence was that led Europe to ban the product?
We stand behind the science that was developed for the chemistry and believe that there are safe uses and safe and ways to manage the risks associated with that chemistry. Okay,
this person that says Bayer is investing more than $5 billion to find alternatives to glyphosate. Are you doing the same with chlorpyrifos?
There are, as I said before, there are always programs that we have underway in our research organization to look for better, safer, healthier, more sustainable alternatives to the products that we have out there today. So yes, we have a very robust R&D pipeline, and we're excited about the new...
Is it $5 billion?
The new technology. No, in total, we spend about $1.2 billion on research. Yeah.
This person asked, there are many good genetically engineered traits in the scientific literature, but engineered resistance to herbicides has had a, quote, checkered history, particularly in imposing selection pressure for weeds to evolve herbicide resistance. What's your vision for weed control?
Yeah, clearly we use the same chemistry on the same weed or pest in general, not just weeds, for many, many years. Resistance is something that is inevitable. Mother Nature is efficient with that. So developing products that have multiple modes of action that control these in many different ways have the ability to dramatically reduce any of that selection and any of that resistance that occurs. So we have products coming that have multiple modes. We have newer chemistry coming to break that resistance cycle. And I think growers today do what they do best. They have figured out ways to more effectively manage some of these issues. They're better farmers today than they were 10 years ago, so we're constantly learning. These issues can be managed quite readily.
Okay. You may have actually addressed some of this in your talk, but what does the future hold for organic crop protection tools, and also what is Corteva doing to promote healthier soil that in ways that doesn't involve farm chemicals?
Great. So for the organic industry, we do have products that we sell today that go into organic production, and there is clearly consumer demand for those. And so we support, a demand-based system where products are produced in a way that meets that demand. So we have products today and are always looking for more biologically derived, more naturally derived solutions that can play a role in an organic scheme. And what was the second part?
What are you doing to help people improve their soil without using chemicals?
Yeah, so this plays back to to a more climate positive area that I talked about. Soil health and soil fertility have always been at the absolute core of a grower's ability to produce a crop. So there's no better steward of that land than that grower that inherited it from their family and wants to give it to the next generation. So they work tirelessly to maintain soil health in a number of different ways today. We have products coming that can actually improve the carbon content of that soil, make it richer in organic materials. We have techniques like no-tills or low-till, where we don't turn that soil, we don't liberate that organic matter, and we keep it in the soil longer. And then we have the use of cover crops. So we're always learning about different types of cropping systems that in off seasons or in a rotational pattern or even in a winter cover crop scenario can do a phenomenal job of improving the organic content of that soil. So it's a system, and it needs to kind of all work together. And this is, again, the example that I mentioned here at the Chesapeake Bay. What growers have figured out are ways to lock any of their fertilizer use into that ground so it doesn't leach into waterways, to keep that organic matter high so it absorbs more water, and to maintain the carbon health of that soil so it can produce a bigger, more robust crop with less inputs. And that's all been part of that system operating.
Okay, this sounds like it. I was a healthcare reporter. It sounds like this could be about healthcare as well. We hear a lot about precision farming and assertions that we're on the cusp of big technological changes in agriculture. Can you sort out the hype from the promise?
So you think about precision farming in a couple of different ways. First, it has to do about really understanding what is going on that farm right down to the acre level. And so that's taking a look at all of the inputs and understanding productivity and profitability using large data sets to really give growers insights to say, if he's a 3,000 acre corn grower in Illinois, he may have 3 acres in that 3,000 that are their most profitable acres. Today, it's hard to understand why. So with these data tools, we're able to really drill down, literally down to an acre level, and give them the insight as to why are those acres more productive and more profitable than everything else. And now they can go replicate that. So digital first helps with digitizing and understanding. But the second part of digital is this precision agriculture. And it is a way to be more targeted with the use of inputs. And so fertility is a great example. A 3,000 acre farm may have 5 different soil types on it. And each one of those soils needs a different level of fertility to produce and support a corn or a soybean, a corn crop, for example. And so most times growers would have applied fertilizer across the whole field, 3,000 acres, same rate. With precision ag, we can now really dissect that field into those soil zones, and fertilizer spreaders across those fields can optimize their ups and downs in output as the grower drives over the field. And so now we're optimizing the right amount of input for the right soil and produce the healthiest outcome. The same with weed control, the same with insect control. We will have the ability to target applications of our products to just the pest, just the weed, rather than spray products over areas that don't have pressure. Fungal diseases are the same way. We now, through satellite imagery, can detect the presence of fungal diseases in crops, and rather than go out and spray an entire field, we spray the 3 acres that need a solution. So precision ag is an exciting next wave for us, and it's all part of that system of sustainability. How do we produce more with less inputs more sustainably?
So we are almost out of time, but before we move on, I want to let you know about a few upcoming events. Tomorrow morning at 11:30, we have the Prime Minister of Barbados here at the club for a newsmaker. And on Friday morning, we have a panel with immigration judges to talk about changes in the immigration court system. That's at 10 a.m. And before I let you go, we will ask one more question, but I must present you with this highly coveted, exclusive, and hard-to-get National Press Club coffee mug.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And finally, one more. So many people in this room know that DC has a neighborhood called DuPont Circle. We are trying to figure out if, given your merger, if your company is going to vie for new naming rights of DuPont Circle to call it Corteva Circle.
I'm not aware of anything that's underway in that area, but we are proud of the Corteva name, and it's certainly an opportunity, as I said, to create a new company with a new vision for agriculture. And so we'll see. It could show up. It could show up somewhere near you. Thank you.
All right, Jim Collins, thank you very much for being with us at the National Press Club. And we are adjourned.